York City migrant shelter is at full capacity. The situation is so dire, the mayor has said migrants could end up on the streets.
For many of those who came to the U.S. in search of a better life, the American dream is proving to be difficult. Stephanie Bertini talked to a single mom of four who says she fears her family could end up homeless.
Among the asylum seekers living in one of New York City's hotels now being used as a shelter, this woman and her children. The worry is we have to leave the hotel, she says. She asked us not to show her face, explaining she's afraid of being exposed. She's more comfortable living in the shadows because of her immigration status. Fear is something she's learned to live with since she left her home and made the dangerous illegal journey to the United States. I can't work, I can't do anything for the four children. It's complicated, she says. Like every mother, she wants the best for her kids, and that was her motivation to leave her country, a nation in South America where people contend with poverty, political oppression, and other dangers. The quest for a better life, the fight for the American dream, it's the story of countless migrants who are willing to take big risks. This mother paid a human smuggler. She says they traveled through dangerous terrain and crossed several countries, including Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador. Eventually, they crossed the U.S.-Mexico border. We saw many dead people, she says, telling us one of her children almost drowned and her oldest got lost. He was separated from the family for a few hours. A lot of ugly things, people dying of hunger, he says. Clearly, he's already seen the worst life can offer. The illegal journey into the United States proves deadly for many. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has long documented the dangers. When non-citizens cross the border unlawfully, they put their lives in peril. But migrants continue to pour across the border and make their way to New York City, a sanctuary city dealing with a huge overflow that has become a humanitarian crisis. The demand for shelter so overwhelming, officials are now enforcing new measures like time limits, 30 days for singles and 60 days for families. And then we don't know where we will go, she says. She's on the edge waiting for more information after seeing this posted in the halls of the hotel where she and her children are staying. It's written in several languages, including English, and says in part, Mayor Eric Adams announced a new rule that impacts all families with children staying at this location. Site staff will provide you with information about when your last day at this location will be. The city says families with nowhere to go can resubmit for assistance, but officials also keep saying resources are at capacity. The information can be overwhelming when you don't know the language or have a support system. I feel alone because I don't have family here, she says. The single mother was told by other migrants that New York City is the place to go to find that better life. Now, as she faces the reality and the pressure of having to do it on her own here, she wonders if she made the right choice. I don't want to be on the street with the children, she says. Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News. He's worried about the future.
I don't want to end up like a lot of homeless people.
We found this man standing outside the Roosevelt Hotel with his belongings on the sidewalk. It's a familiar place he first went to when he arrived to New York City as one of the more than 100,000 migrants and asylum seekers who have come looking for refuge since last spring. The Roosevelt is the arrival center for migrants and asylum seekers during what the city has called an ongoing crisis.
The Roosevelt sent us to a shelter in Brooklyn, and we stayed there like for almost 3 months. They moved us in another shelter and made us to sign a letter that they're gonna literally kick us out in 60 days.
And you got kicked out?
Yes, tonight, fortunately.
With resources at capacity, the city started imposing limitations on shelter stays for migrants. Initially 60 days, and as the crisis progressed, now it's 30 days for singles and 60 days for families.
I know the situation. I know that it's tough. Literally, like in New York City is like dealing with a lot of stuff, but it's also difficult because we're struggling over here.
The reality of these restrictions is difficult for someone in his shoes.
Why did you come to America?
I come to America like everyone, pretty much like an asylum seeker because of the facts in my country, and like everything there is terrible.
Where are you from?
I'm from a country in Africa.
Following the lead of countless others, he crossed the U.S.-Mexico border into the United States in pursuit of a better life.
I crossed the border by smuggling, like pretty much like every single person here.
He paid those human smugglers everything he had and more.
Every single penny, everything. Actually, you had to borrow some money from others, from like my relatives. We suffered over there a lot.
As a single young man in his 20s, he was willing to risk it all for freedom.
To save myself from those monsters in my country, basically.
He traveled through several continents and countries.
Africa, Turkey, South America, and then to America, like Mexico, yeah.
He knew then, and even more so now, how dangerous the illegal journey into the United States is. The federal government has long documented that many die trying to do what he did. Now he's reflecting.
Does this feel like it's better?
Here, not for the moment.
In a recent statement to Fox 5 News, a spokesperson for the mayor said New York City is far past its breaking point. For months, Mayor Adams has warned that without substantive help from our state and federal partners, this crisis could begin to play out on city streets. Humanitarians are concerned about migrants being added to the homeless population. He and others like him are too, as they contend with what being displaced truly feels like.
We're literally like squeezed like tiny sandwiches. Thank you, New York, for treating us like sandwiches.
This is video inside the shelter where he finds himself now. It's dark, but you can see they are all on the floor. Under federal law, asylum seekers are protected from deportation but can't legally work for 6 months. His pockets are empty.
Looking for like jobs under the table or anything that I can like earn a little bit of money.
As if his living situation isn't humbling enough.
What did you do back home?
I used to be an English teacher.
When we asked him why he's sharing his story but not showing his face,
Don't want like anything that's gonna affect my case in the future, because I told you I'm an asylum seeker.
just imagine how difficult his old life was. That's the only way to make sense of why he would leave everything behind, including, he tells us, his sick mother for this.
Extremely horrible, frankly speaking.
Horrible, but still he hopes it will pay off.
Waiting for the American dream, like waiting for them to save me.
Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News. This young family calls the Row Hotel home for now. 53, he says, explaining how many days they have left until they have to leave. A little worried, he tells us, as he thinks about all the uncertainty they're facing. But as he thinks about the long term, all you see is hope. My future, good things for my children, stability and tranquility, he says. The children, 6 and 3 years old, were with him and his wife as they left Venezuela, a nation in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, and made the illegal journey into the United States. I got out of Venezuela from Colombia, he says, telling us they went through 8 countries before crossing the U.S.-Mexico border into Texas. Touching American soil was the goal, he explains, but the destination was always New York City, where they arrived in a bus, like so many other asylum seekers. New York, I will explain it to you. Us immigrants, many of us, we come here for stability for our children. Here, we hear they will help us. City officials say almost 150,000 asylum seekers have come to New York City seeking shelter since last spring. Each week, the the number goes up as the city is in the midst of a migrant crisis. Resources are at capacity. The Row Hotel is one of more than 200 emergency shelters established by New York City for migrants. But the demand is so great, restrictions are now in effect, putting limits on shelter stays. We met this family shortly after they were given a 60-day notice to vacate after living in the hotel for months. It's a little stressful, he says. It is faith, determination, and the push for a better life that fuels migrants and asylum seekers to fight for what so many of them explain in one short phrase. The American dream, he says. But now that he's here, he tells us he understands how complicated that American dream can be. I am waiting for the work papers, he says. Immigration matters take time. The family has applied for asylum like many Venezuelans do. Right now, they're waiting on a decision from the federal government that will determine the rest of their lives. In Venezuela, poverty, corruption, and danger is reality. When you have two young children, it feels like a death sentence, he says. I think in America, the stability, it's very tranquil. Tranquility and stability is worth everything when you're from a society that's in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. So even though they can't work and don't know where they will be living when the 60 days is up, for them, this is worth it. The situation we are going through, he says, it's all for his boys to have the kind of childhood he never knew, in a country where they can grow up to be whatever they have the potential to be. Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News. Lining this sidewalk on any given night, people from different parts of the world who want nothing more than a life in America. I came to register at immigration, says this man from Guinea, West Africa. He's been in New York City for only 2 weeks, he says, telling us after traveling through several countries guided by the human smugglers he paid, he crossed the border illegally from Mexico into the United States. Here, he hopes to be granted asylum. He says poverty, danger, and social unrest in his country forced him out. He was in fear of losing my life in Africa, he says. We met him on a Sunday night in November in a sea of migrants and asylum seekers, all of them outside the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office in Lower Manhattan, where we've learned that even with an appointment, being seen is not guaranteed. This line is always here, says this asylum seeker from Ecuador, telling us it's well known in the migrant community that the demand on the New York City ICE office exceeds the number of people that can be seen daily. About 500 people go in daily. That's why there's this line. Not everyone can enter, he says. So no matter the weather, they wait and sleep outside in an attempt to ensure they will get into the ICE office in the morning. This line along the sidewalk is indicative of just how many migrants and asylum seekers are in New York City and what they're willing to endure. In this line, there doesn't exist a bathroom, he says. No bathrooms, and for many of them, no familiar faces.
Are you family, friends?
No. Okay. We are strangers.
Strangers who have learned to find a piece of home even though it might as well be a world away.
Where are you guys from?
We are from China.
You're all from China?
Yeah.
In the loneliest times, somebody who speaks your language can be just as good as someone you know.
We all want to stay in America.
You need to go to immigration tomorrow?
Yeah.
ICE did.
You have to go to ICE?
Yeah.
These asylum seekers from India tell me the life they left behind
India is dangerous.
is much more complicated than their main challenge on this night.
Cold. Yeah.
Yeah, cold.
You're feeling cold.
Yeah.
Blankets and cardboard boxes provide some relief from the cold overnight, but clearly this is far from ideal.
You can see they're doing what they can to keep warm, and if you take a closer look, you'll notice they're doing what they can to comfort one another, and that's whether they know each other or not.
From sharing food to engaging in a little conversation, they all know all too well how stressful waiting can be. When your future is uncertain, you learn to appreciate even the smallest comforts. That's the reality that inspires Glenda Montes to come out here every night. With the help of a relative, she sells cups of coffee for
$2.
$2, she says. Originally from Colombia, she tells us she's been in New York City for about 5 months. The idea to sell coffee came after waiting on this very sidewalk for the very same reason as the others. My husband and I got the idea to sell the coffee, she says, telling us they escaped Colombia with their 2 daughters. Like countless other asylum seekers, they left, looking for a better life, for the future of our children, she says. Refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants leave their countries for different reasons, but for many, it's because they are in fear. Crime, war, extreme poverty, social injustice, and political or religious oppression are some of the reasons they decide to leave their homes. In order to be granted asylum in the United States, a person must prove credible fear of persecution or torture. There's many stories of different people coming in different ways, different stories of the journey, she says. It's well known that journey into the United States is dangerous. Many lose their lives while illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. For those who make it, there is often a long road ahead. Settling in a new country is far from easy, especially without a support system. I want to return home, this woman says. I don't have anyone to help me with my daughter, she tells us right after she tucked her daughter in where only blankets provide a barrier from the pavement. Clearly defeated, she didn't expect to turn around after making the illegal journey into the U.S. from Ecuador.
Con los coyotes.
With coyotes, yes, she says. Coyotes is a term used to refer to those who smuggle humans into the United States. Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, targets and investigates all links in the human smuggling chain, including overseas recruiters and organizers. But look no further than the sidewalk here to see the enforcement isn't working well enough. The federal government is aware of the backlog at the New York City ICE office. In a statement, a spokesperson said U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement continues efforts to address processing delays. We've confirmed after crossing the southwest border, non-citizens, including asylum seekers, are told to schedule an appointment within 60 days at the ICE office where they reside. Also, in the statement from ICE, we were told the New York City office has capacity to see approximately 600 non-citizens a day on average, depending on the complexity of each case. Over the course of several weeks, we came to the area several times. We talked to people on and off camera, not just in the dark, but also under daylight. On this Friday morning in November, we found a lot of people eager and ready for the doors to open. The ICE office operates Monday to Friday, starting at 8 a.m. I passed the whole night here, says this man from a country in Africa.
Oh, blanket?
Blanket.
With a blanket in that plastic bag and immigration paperwork in that file folder, he and a few others with him were waiting to get in.
No.
But on this day, by 9:30 in the morning, it's closed, says this man from Ecuador, clearly disappointed. A man here told me a security guard said, come on Monday at 3 a.m., this man from Cuba tells us. As federal employees who work at the location handed out information, a paper which explains in several languages what to do next, we watched a range of emotions in the crowd, from angst to confusion to downright sadness. It's not easy, says this man from Venezuela, clearly at a breaking point. I left the country thinking everything is easy, but the situation is not how one thinks of it. You are by yourself here. On the sidewalk outside the New York City ICE office in Lower Manhattan, week after week, month after month, as the city's migrant crisis lingers with no end in sight, there are so many voices, faces, people who prove the complexities of immigration are far beyond numbers, policies, and resources. They are the migrants in America who, in their own words, can explain just how challenging it all is on a human level. Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News.
Hi, my name is Sonia Castro-John, and I am an immigrant for 25 years.
The English she now speaks evidence of her time here. Her pride comes from a place of survival. And the sewing is part of the story, then and now.
De niña, pues empecé.
From when I was a girl, I was working as a seamstress. When I immigrated to this country, I thought I would find work like that, as a seamstress. But when I came here, the situation turned out different, she says. Sonia Castrejon was 19 years old when she left Mexico and crossed the border illegally.
En la colonia donde yo vivo.
In the town where I lived, you heard people saying there are those who will bring you here, she tells us, referring to the human smugglers who she says she paid to get to the United States.
Mucho peligro.
A lot of danger is how she describes the journey. She says it was poverty that pushed her out of Mexico. She came to the United States in search of
Un mañana mejor.
a better tomorrow, she says. What she didn't expect were the challenges that come with what was and still is her reality.
Yo no soy legal.
I am not legal, she says, describing her immigration status in the United States. In order to survive, she quickly learned that any job is better than no job. And that's how she says she's making it, raising children, her oldest now 21, and her youngest 11, who can already sew quite well.
Yo me dan en construcción.
If they give me construction, I will do construction. If they ask me to clean, I will clean. Wherever they give me work in the mornings, I go. And in the night, I am here.
Y en las noches aquí.
Here is where she operates La Michoacana. Her small sewing business gets its name from Michoacan, Mexico, where her family is from.
Me permitieron entrar aquí.
They allowed me to do it here, she says. At this point, she's an expert at working around barriers. She pays a little rent and operates out of this small Brooklyn bookstore after hours. Creating garments and doing alterations for her clients brings in some money. But that's not all she does here. She also helps other women like her.
Enseñarles a coser.
Teaching them how to sew, she says, so
Después en un futuro.
in the future they can work. Her free sewing classes are for women who are in the country without work papers, with few work opportunities that usually pay almost
Por nada.
nothing, she says, telling us she knows firsthand that being paid under the table often means well below minimum wage. Susana Vermejo has been in the United States for more than 20 years, married with children. She knows all about finding ways to make it.
Gracias a Dios me dio la.
Thank God that she gave me the opportunity, Sonia, for these sewing classes, she says. After spending years working odd jobs for little money,
Es difícil.
difficult is how she describes it, the idea of being able to take on clients for herself one day is clearly empowering. But this is about more than that.
Me siento en familia con Sonia.
I feel like I am family with Sonia. Coming to these classes, one disconnects from the problems and life outside, she says. Being surrounded by other women with similar stories is comforting.
La mayoría de los inmigrantes.
The majority of us immigrants, we have a life that's very difficult, honestly, she says.
No, no es fácil.
It's not easy, says Victoria Tiros.
Yo siempre
I always talk to God, and I said, I have a way, she tells us. And she's found a way to make a life here. She's raised children as a single mother, working any job she could. And even though it was tough, she says it's still better than the extreme poverty she left behind in Mexico. Now, more than 30 years later, knowing her kids live an American lifestyle,
la satisfacción más grande.
the satisfaction is very great for a mother, she says. She's hoping these sewing classes will help her elevate financially one day.
Más complicado.
Very complicated. Work, rent, food, everything is expensive, she says. As these women look at the surge of migrants coming to New York City now after crossing the border illegally, some 150,000 according to the city since last spring, they understand what drives them.
Pienso que la.
I think the people hear the same things that I was hearing. America is different. There's money, everything. They also understand the challenges ahead.
Si yo a veces llego a llorar.
If at times I cry for what I went through, to me, it's for everyone, because we are all going through the same thing, she says. According to the Pew Research Center, as of 2021, there were more than 10 million unauthorized immigrants living in the United States from different parts of the world. Achieving legal immigration status in the U.S. is never guaranteed.
Yo sé que en cualquier momento.
I know that at any moment they can send me back to my country because I am illegal here. My fear is there, but I am a strong woman. She credits her faith,
La fe que tengo en Dios.
the faith I have in God, and she hopes one day her main goal in America will be achieved.
Mis papeles.
My papers, she says. Although for her, a pathway to citizenship has not been possible yet.
Eso es lo que ellos no entienden.
A lot of people don't understand we are here out of necessity. And Castrejon says because she does understand, she will keep running these free classes to help the migrants in America, specifically those here in New York City.
Yo tengo ahorita una lista.
I have a list of 400 people waiting, she says, with donated sewing machines and supplies she buys herself.
Se empezó a regar la voz.
By word of mouth is how her wait list keeps growing.
Cuando tú sabes de dónde vienes,
When you know where you came from, how you suffered for me, it gives me the need to help. Stephanie Bertini, Fox 5 News.